There we go. And now it's open.
It's filling up. And Brian, you say your last name Spillbeller?
Spillbeller, yep.
Spillbeller. Indiana's having some COVID trouble, huh?
Well, who's not having COVID trouble?
That's true.
Kids are still in school. That's one thing that they're still doing. So we'll see how it goes. I got 3 that are all elementary school aged. So they're all in school still.
Yeah, our schools are closed, but our bars were packed over Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
What in the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah, we'll get started in about 2 minutes here. Just make sure that people are getting in. I really liked your presentation.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I like the second half better. Doesn't mean the first half wasn't good, but the first half was kind of like stuff I didn't have to write down much on because I kind of knew all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I've followed you guys so closely. But I just love getting into individuals. I mean, it's just so fascinating to see that stuff.
It can go on all day. The anecdote game is what we call it. You start the anecdote game and you can go forever.
Yeah. Okay, I think, Blake, can we go ahead and get started?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to get started. People are going to come and go. This will be recorded for people who don't get to see it all. But today I'm with 2 of my good friends, Brian Spillbeller and Aaron Hunter. Mark Branstad, the CEO of Tracking Football, is not here, but he's also a good friend of mine. And we were just talking before we went live that a lot of the things that happened in my life and what happened in Tracking and Football's life happened about the same time. Aaron and Brian, you guys were both teachers and coaches, correct?
No, I was in sales.
You were in sales.
Yeah.
It was Brian that was football and track.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started coaching and teaching in 2003, right out of college, and was freshman football, wrestling, and then boys and girls throwers for the varsity track team. Did that for 3 or 4 years, and that's where I met Mark, who was also a freshman football coach. And then Mark became the head track coach at the high school. So that was the origin for all this. And then I ended up going to Carmel High School, which is just north of Indianapolis, and was there for 11 years and 5,000 student school, and coached varsity football there. And after some years of that, that's kind of when the track and football thing actually started, like you mentioned, in 2015.
Yeah, that's in Carmel. You were the head football coach at Carmel.
I was the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach at Carmel. So from 2006 to 2017, I was there. So I was there for the big run of state championships and state runner-ups and all that. Yeah, I was the offensive line and offensive coordinator there.
And refresh my memory, the TFC speaker, Scott
Turnquist, he's a good friend of mine. Yeah, Scott Turnquist was actually on staff with me for a while, and then he is now the head football coach at Zionsville High School, which is a neighboring town. And Zionsville just recently went to the state championship for the first time in a long time under Scott, who certainly incorporates the whole TFC mentality with what he does with his athletes, for sure. So
yeah, he's kind of a feed the cats type of guy and stuff. And yeah, I love that. And then you guys also had a legendary track coach at Mount Carmel.
Yeah. Chuck, trying to remember his last name right now, but Chuck Keppen was a big time guy. And then, we've got Keith Browner is a coach at Carmel now, the head track coach there. And
I know
Mark,
Keith.
Yep. And Mark actually did some volunteer coaching of the jumps. Mark was kind of a jumps aficionado when he was coaching track, and he did some stuff when I was coaching football at Carmel. Mark was doing some volunteer jumps coaching for him.
So just like the Track Football Consortium and Feed the Cats kind of grew organically without, we never tried to grow it. It just grew. We started something, we put a lot into it, and it just grew. It sounds like you guys started very organically as well. Basically, from your presentation, it sounds like you were in the same position that most track programs are in, that you needed football players to come out for track. And not only to help your track program, but you knew as a football coach that it would help your football program as well. And so you started mining data like crazy to convince these kids to run track.
Absolutely. And it was, that was the entire structure for what it became. And it was just a passion thing. I mean, none of this happens if Mark specifically wasn't just really nerdily involved in collecting the data. You know what I mean? But it started because we were just trying to give fodder to these kids. We wanted locker signs, we wanted things to get them to actually participate. But then, I mean, Mark just really saw that connection 2 decades ago, where not just do these football players participate, but the data, the performance data is really extraordinary. And that's really what hit him, was that it's not as necessarily about the participation. It's about the fact these guys were really good track athletes, and it's never talked about. It's just some blurb at the bottom of their football bio. And that's really where Mark kind of centered the research around.
Now, Aaron, what would you say when, believe it or not, there are people that argue with our statements about track and field and football needing each other and as being good for athletes. And I hear all the time, especially from weight room people, who I think are oftentimes trying to convince athletes not to play a sport so that they'll lift weights more. They say that they bring up causation and correlation, that just because a great football player has great track times, that's just because they were genetically fast. And I believe much more in the causation, because I see improvements in speed.
Yes. And I think to answer your question specifically, I would tell those people to look at the data. I mean, as Brian alluded to, Mark very nerdedly collected this data. And when Mark first approached me, I was a walk-on at IU varsity football program, and I walked on there because I thought, well, the smaller schools offering me, I'm better than that. Well, when I got there, I realized that there are some amazing track and field / football athletes out there. And if I would have had the data we collect back then, I may have taken another journey, because, we can all work hard, we can develop ourselves, but the track data is this very objective and pure view of where someone's at, where they've been, and where they can go.
Well, and I think, Tony, the key that a lot of football coaches, what constitutes getting better at something, how this goes. It's like the beauty of track and the beauty of strength and conditioning, and just there's very true metrics that you can just measure against, miles per hour improvements or fly times and so on. And the bottom line is that you can chart progress so effectively. And I think a lot of football coaches, if you ask them, well, how do you know if this guy's getting better? Well, I just see it. I think
that's objective.
And so, to me, I think that it's not to say that, the only reason that a guy is fast is biology. That's certainly not true, or that slower guys can't get faster. That they can certainly get faster. I mean, I don't understand why it has to be one or the other. Why can't it just be both? That, there are guys predisposed to having some genetic gifts and biology that's going on that can also then be developed. I mean, you brought up the IU guys, Ballou, who was a strength coach at Avon when I was at Carmel and even before that, Avon High School, just northwest of Indianapolis. And back then, Dave Ballou and I were doing online lift contests for all high school football players in Indiana so that we could start charting progress across the state of who was improving in the bench, squat, clean, and whatnot. What Ballou and Rhea did is transcendent, I think, at IU, right? And they had
revolutionary.
It's amazing. It's great stuff. At the same time, though, I posted that thing just the other day. IU also happened to bring in a much larger percentage of football prospects that had a background in track. Okay. So they had these kids coming into the program that were coming from a track and field background, much more than what they had coming in prior. So there's both. They were improving athleticism, but it's not like they had, totally clueless people to begin with. It's not like they had non-athletes to begin with, right?
Right. Once you prioritize speed, you will prioritize the recruitment of speed. And then the thing that I always say in my presentations is I give football coaches an A+ for the love of speed. They all love speed. But I give them a C- on maintaining speed because the average team gets slower. And I give them an F for improving speed. Of course, college coaches think that the kids are already at their ceiling, and they're really not. And they can get slower. And going back to Ray and Ballou, I don't know if Alabama ever gets beat again. Because
if they can continue to attract and that prestige of the program, they're now putting them in an environment that is only going to just enhance all of these qualities that they came in with, right? And that's the great thing, is that it does take both. It's that identification and verification to begin with, because there are, look, you're not going to take people that are certain times and certain distances to certain level. It's scaffolding. It's no different than in education, right? People start at certain proficiencies, and as a mentor, as a teacher, you may be able to take one guy up here, but the other guy can only get to here. Not everybody can get to that point, right? They can't all get to the same point.
Right.
You can improve and you can scaffold, but you have to kind of be able to identify where they started. And that's really what we're doing, is allowing them to kind of, what's the foundational raw athleticism as it presents itself compared to football players, that's the key, is that when we talk about metrics, it's about how does this relate to the football player population, not just to the generic track and field athlete, right? Because we look at a guy that's 225 pounds, and if he can run an 11.2, it's like, holy smokes. Okay.
He's Derrick Henry.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right. Derrick actually ran a little faster, and
Derrick Henry's not a step slow because at his size, yes, he is a total freak.
So and I heard you guys talk about that yesterday. I listened to you on your podcast, and I thought that was an important point, is that because a lot of football coaches will say, well, he's 11.2, he's slow, too slow for us. Right. And that's the mistake in two parts. Number one, they have no idea how big the kid is, which they should. If they're ever going to say that something's slow, you better understand the size of the athlete that you're referring to, because football is a game of size too. But then also, they have no idea how fast any of the kids that they've coached in their past were in high school. They just know, I've watched the Olympics once every 4 years, and I never hear an 11.2 time in the Olympics. Or I watch the state championship meet every year, and I never see an 11.2 place. That's what they think, right?
Right. It's exactly right. And oftentimes kids that don't run track, I would think, would be very suspect.
I'll let Aaron speak to that. We're seeing, have you noticed that, Aaron? Last couple of years, it feels that way, right?
I would definitely say we've noticed it through the people we speak with. And we can all say what we want, but we know that, combine data is their other possible avenue to get a somewhat objective mark. But we also know sometimes the combine data it's slightly suspect, and coaches are going to trust what they see with their eyes on their campus over some of the data that they're getting through the combines. But I do think that, between your company and what we've done, is the track speed being this objective and verified is really, people always had it as this undercurrent, but it seems to be, overflowing now would be the best analogy for it.
Yeah, I want to clear up a misconception. And it's something that actually came up in a TFC presentation by Keir Wenham Flatt. where he did a study of like the fastest 10 times ever at the combine and how none of them are in the Hall of Fame. Whereas like the 10 best receivers that ever played in the NFL were much more of a Jerry Rice type. And I think this is a rhetorical question, but none of us are saying that speed alone is the metric for greatness. However, if you are the size of Jerry Rice and can run a 4.6 instead of a 4.7, you'll be a much better player. And the other thing is that if you really study the absolute fastest people in the history of the combine, they are typically very small.
Yes.
It's just a narrowed approach. It's this, we always want to look at anomalies and then let them be the rule, you know. We want to look at the 10 fastest people and then let those 10 fastest people who are on this very far end of the curve, you know, then kind of guide how we should approach the entire huge, massive data set. And it's just silly to me. It's you know, the bottom line is that football is a game played by big people that are highly athletic, and bigger, faster, stronger tends to win. Big
Yes.
people got to hit small people, and they got to be able to get to those people to hit them.
And the people who do not have good movement skills are bad football players at every position, with the exception of kicker or a possible a quarterback that's a pocket thrower.
Yeah, but anymore, I mean, even as a pocket thrower, you know, you can't be stationary in that pocket with the defensive linemen that are coming through. I mean, the bottom line is like, you know, football is a gladiator sport, you know, and I just feel like when we start to use the exceptions and we want to try to make the rules out of them, because nobody on our staff has once ever said that just because you have a fast 100 or a far shot put or a long jump or whatever, or even that you have a high PAI for that matter, that you're guaranteed to be a great football player. We've never once ever said that. We have said, though, that if you study decades of football players like we have, you see that in the aggregate, the NFL All-Pro football players in the past decade, as a population, when you look at them and you freeze frame them from high school, their scores and their times and their distances are better than the average college football players are when he's in high school. And every rung down in football that you go, it is true. SEC players score higher than Sun Belt players, and Sun Belt players score higher than, you know, FCS players, and so on down the
They
track.
score exactly what goes into that score. I know, but for the people listening right now, what things go into that score?
Aaron?
Essentially, our score is very simplistic. When we all got together and we were trying to figure out, you know, how to gauge it, how to score it, you know, there's this SMART score out there, which no one knows what's in this black box or what the number means. It's not position specific. So we wanted something simplistic so that the football coach could look at it and say, okay, I understand what's going into this. And it is simply height, weight, position, track and field data, and other multi-sport data. And why that's important is, for example, you know, we can't quantify exactly what the correlation is between basketball and football, but we know that a high percentage of tight ends in NFL were also basketball players. So there's this additive that goes into the score with other multi-sports like wrestling, baseball, and, you know, our algorithm's smart enough to know by position where it seems to correlate best. And
yes,
Tony, back to your point on the 10 fastest guys, one thing that, you know, and Brian has beat this drum quite a while, and he does a great job as far as our client retention and training them on our score. And we rarely will push really fast guys, but Brian does a great job of saying, look, when you see a fast sprint time, hurdle time in combination with a field event, whether that's high jump, long jump, triple jump, then you know that there's a full body of work there. And the anecdotes are Saquon Barkley, Adrian Peterson, Julio Jones. I mean, the anecdotes just continue to roll out. I think there might be a better study of who are the best and fastest athletes in combination in a sprint event and a track or a field event, so to speak.
A jump.
Hall of Famers go.
I mean, I can't imagine any exercise more valuable to an athlete than a triple jump. It is just unbelievable. And so if you have a wide receiver that's a 50-foot triple jumper, he's probably going to be an all-pro. I mean,
I'll tell you,
that's how good of an athlete he is.
It's that triple jump. I wish the triple jump was in every high school state, you know.
You guys not having it in Indiana?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I knew Indiana was a couple rungs below Illinois. That's awful. That's like
our football team's in the top 10 or 15, I guess now, but I don't know where Illinois is ranked right now.
We're at the bottom right now.
But I think you're right about the trip. This is something too, Tony, that you're alluding to, that from a football understanding. Look, like we're talking to the level of college football that we talk to the most are these guys in player personnel departments. Okay. College football is now very robust personnel departments. So we certainly talk to position coaches from time to time, but much more with these personnel guys. And when you talk about track, period, whenever you say track and field, the first thing everybody talks about is the 100. I would say that, and I think we might've said this in the presentation, that's one of the more, I won't call it overrated stats that a football evaluator could look at, but it's certainly not the end all be all. And too often that's the first thing they want to talk about. When you start talking about triple jump and long jump and the throws, for football evaluators, those are just gold. And they really, it's crazy, especially with receivers. Receivers are more likely to indicate on jumps than they are sprints. I mean, I
love that about your presentation. And I've never thought about that, but when I heard it, it made perfect sense.
And if you look at the anecdote, it's on an anecdotal level, but it's also on an aggregate level. I mean, really, it's pretty astonishing. And that connection then with what Aaron said, you guys brought up David Montgomery last night, who I think your partner had coached, right? And been around.
Yes.
Right. And so with Montgomery, even, I mean, he was proficient in multiple different types of track events. He was also this and also that. And so I think it's one thing to get enamored with these guys that are really fast, like Tyreek Hill, but even Tyreek Hill was a jumper too. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing, is like when it's a one-trick pony, there's certainly signal there that needs to be, you need to pay attention to it. But at the same time, like a Rondell Moore at Purdue was really above average in everything between the 55 and the 400. His 100 wasn't going to blow you away, but where he lays out from like a Big Ten receiver perspective in all four events from the 55 to the 400 is astonishing. Nobody can do all four of those things as well as he does. So that's the cool part of this, is that we can't just make it a singular thing, like it's a singular 40 time or a singular 100 meter. It's this body of work that track data provides that we can kind of slice it out, you know?
I love that. Now, one thing that has nothing to do with our talk, for people that are participants here, you can be typing in questions to the Q&A section. You can be chatting as well, but the Q&A is where, when we get stuck and we don't have anything else to talk about, which may not happen, but we will try to get to those Q&A things. Now, before, I have two changes right here in our direction. One thing is you guys are now everywhere. I mean, like you're in the NFL, you're in the different conferences. Do you remember when you turned the corner?
That is hard to say, Tony, because I think we've had just like a good, goal line stand or running the ball in. I mean, we've had our heads down just going, but I want to say after our very first AFCA, which I don't even think we were all, again, full time. I think we closed our first Big Ten client. And then once Brian and I both came on full time, I think the next summer we closed 7 in a row in 3-month time frame. I think that's when things really turned the corner. And then Brian did a good job of reaching out to like the Senior Bowl, who, now it is part of their scouting routine to go through our stuff. So,
but you know what? Also, I'll put it to the power of social media for us has been really, really valuable. And a lot of it is that we were building out the data sets and doing the research and getting the website developed, all that stuff, putting our heads down. But then we were also throwing out the things that we were finding. I mean, I was literally writing, your famous Ohio State whiteboard tweet, right? About Urban Meyer and his recruiting came from our data, right? And so, we were doing that type of stuff. And then I was, after my class, I would get on my whiteboard and take pictures and, hey, did you know how many of the Super Bowl guys, because people just didn't know, the masses, let's say, didn't really connect like how relevant just multi-sport participation was for NFL players. Okay. And that message just shot out, but then that gave us awareness and kind of brand recognition, because prior to that, nobody knew what Trekking Football was. Now the problem became, everybody thought Trekking Football was just this Twitter account that put out multiple sport participation data. We got on the road after our first AFCA, and Aaron and I traveled to the Carolinas, to Texas, West Coast. Aaron was in Utah. I was in the Midwest, and we just got on campuses because we had pounded the door enough and cold called them enough that they finally invited us in. And when we got invited in, all it would take, Tony, was them to just pull up the guys that they had coached in their past.
Oh yeah.
And that's where it turned, is that it was no longer a number, but it was a guy that they coached, that they knew, that they recruited. And we were telling them something about that guy that they didn't realize and that they didn't know. And that, to me, when we started doing that, I said, we've got something now, because we can talk anecdotes with them. And I've never met any of these players, but I can tell things to these football coaches about these players that they didn't even realize.
Yeah, one of my favorite anecdotes goes back to 2001. I had a 6'3", 215-pound kid named Braden Jones. And he was a 3-sport athlete. And Braden, Class A state champ, 23.4 in the long jump. But he also ran a 48.8 in the 400. And he also was on the small school state record breaking team, the 4x1, 4x2. Already, that's like the entire, if there was a PAI for Braden Jones, it would have been very high.
He's a 4.2, to let you know.
Which makes him in the top 2 to 3%, right?
He's up there.
He actually, he did not get to go to the NFL Combine, but his SIU stats actually made him he had better combine numbers than Vernon Davis that came out at the same time. So anyway, with Braden, I'll never forget, I was like his agent. I was the guy sending his VHS cassettes to all these Big Ten schools. He ended up going to Northwestern his first couple of years and then went to SIU. But I remember talking to the linebackers coach. And I said, he long jumped 23.4. And he said, is that good? I said, for a guy 6.
Now, did he play tight end or linebacker in high school?
He played linebacker at Northwestern.
So if he's a linebacker, okay, just so this, but this is now that same college coach that asked you that question.
Yes.
Okay? Can go to Trekking Football like I just did, type in Braden Jones, see that he's a 2001 high school grad, that he became a UDFA for the Vikings at one point in time, went to SIU, 4-sport athlete, right here, 23 long jump, okay? If I'm at Alabama today and I wanted to pull up his profile, I could find it and it would tell me that he is the 3rd best long jumping linebacker that the SEC has seen in the last 10 years.
There you go. You know how many scholarship offers he got?
Exactly.
2.
And if he's a linebacker, by the way, which I had him as a tight end and a linebacker, but if he's a linebacker in high school, he was a perfect 5.0 PAI. Perfect. Yeah. Less than 1% of guys that we ever score get that score. And like you said, he goes to Southern Illinois. But Tony, it still happens. There's still 5.0 guys that they fall for whatever reason. They fall through the cracks. And it's unnerving to me still.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that things have changed now. Braden would have been an SEC player probably if that would have happened. Then you throw in the fact that he's a 36 ACT and he's an orthopedic surgeon these days. He was a guy that should have been highly recruited, but he went to a high school with 600 kids.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that there's a lot of bias in college football recruiting still for geography. I think that a lot of guys that come from smaller areas are still overlooked just because of where they're from. We see that all the time, really west of where you are, you know, I mean, in the Missouris and in the Iowas and the Kansas and all that. A lot of these guys are multi-sport athletes, really, really good track athletes. But they're not on the map for the travel. I mean, what airport's next to them, you know? And that is still a factor, but that's where services like what we're doing kind of alert guys, right? To there's something there that I might want to continue to investigate, because I'm not just going to blindly go to these areas of the country or to that 600 person school, you know? But if I see a number that indicates that there's enough signal that I might want to go check that out, now they will, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's a question. I don't know if I'm going to get a great answer from you guys or not on this, but obviously when you went into this, deep down, you knew that the fast track guys were really good football players, and the guys that could throw 60 feet were really good linemen. And the guys that could long jump, triple jump, and high jump were the cats of the football world. I mean, you kind of knew that stuff. But whenever you're researching as deeply as you guys did, there has to be some strange things you learned. Is there anything strange that you learned that you didn't expect?
I mean, I think there's lots of things. Some of the things that come to mind, though, are kind of what I mentioned earlier, that Brian does a good job with their clients, is these guys who hurdles by itself is just an amazing event. We look at Ezekiel Elliott, but when you see a guy like Montgomery or someone else who amazing sprint times, a shot put or a long jump, I mean, I think that's the thing when I first got into this, that I had the old mindset of, you know, it's got to be a fast 60 guy, 100-meter dash guy, but and I wasn't sure how important the relays were, but you know, our numbers are very solid on the relays too. So I think a lot of that has fed into opening even my mind as someone who helped start this data.
So you're saying that one of the strange things you learned is that it's so much more than just the speed from track and field. It's the agility. I think the hurdles are the most aggressive event in the history of the world. I mean, people have to absolutely be fearless. And that's a football player. Yes. And, you know, I know you talked about the 400 meters and that inner drive that it takes to be a good 400 guy. And then the high jump, long jump, triple jump is just, I mean, I would want an entire wide receiver crew built with those types of things.
Well, when we talk about the high jump too, I mean, you know, as I high jumped in high school, and the proprioception it takes to know where your body's at, tucking your chin, bringing your butt up, bring your feet over the bar. I mean, that's the type of control, body control you want out of wide receivers when they're going to high point a ball with a defensive back draped on them. So
my surprise was the irrelevance of wrestling.
Really?
And I think part of it is because the culture today is different than maybe 20 years ago. And a lot of wrestling programs are now club-based and not necessarily like varsity high school-based. So I think and I think wrestling is tougher to track from a participation level than maybe some of the other sports with the ways that we do it. So maybe we underestimate, but even if we're underestimating it, it's still just not that relevant. And I always still today hear college, I want linemen that wrestle. I'm like, well, what linemen are wrestling, you know, that you're recruiting? Because like, I don't see them do it. There are.
I was actually going to ask you about one lineman who was a state champion wrestler. See if you can get this right. 4.85 in the 40, state champ in the shot put and discus, and was an offensive tackle in the last year's draft. Buccaneers.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
Tristan Wirth. Tristan Wirth.
Oh, Wirth. Oh. Yeah.
When I saw that, he weighs like 340.
Yeah.
Or 335. And he ran 4.85.
Yeah, but he also, I mean, he ran a 40 in high school too, you know? And that's the thing is that, you know, it's sometimes funny to me where you see the NFL combine data that occurs and you kind of look back to what they looked like in high school and you can kind of see that connection.
The same person?
Yeah. You know, like if you looked at the combine as a web, right. And, you know, it's pulling on certain aspects that they're strong in and other aspects that they're not. I mean, a lot of that kind of exists. You know, Wirfs is a guy that I remember putting into the database when he was a high school prospect, and immediately, you know, he's another 5.0 PAI, you know, popped.
Was he really a 5?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was 6'5", 290. He was a 67-foot shot putter and 190-foot discus thrower.
And in the off season, he didn't lift because he wrestled.
Yeah, and he also played some baseball, Tony.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, is that he was a wrestler, but see, you know, here's the thing that maybe surprises me is how special that is. I mean, we think that everybody's Tristan Wirfs maybe sometimes, right? It's like, do we recognize like how, as a comparison to all of college football's past, as a comparison to every offensive tackle in the Big Ten that we've tracked in the last 10 years, Tristan Wirfs is the best shot putter and the best discus thrower at offensive tackle that the Big Ten has seen in the last 10 years. You know, I guess maybe I was surprised at how special some things are that we don't think are, and then how kind of normal things are that we actually think are special. It's funny, you know, we want to tell ourselves these stories based on our experiences. And then if you can just detach that and you can just look at what the data is telling you, it's pretty interesting. You know, it makes sense that a wrestler would make for a good offensive lineman. But again, I mean, I coached O-line for 15 years. I can count on one hand how many high school wrestlers that I actually coached that were also high school offensive linemen in my coaching career. There just weren't that many.
Wow. So. Here's a weird question. We've described a 5.0. Describe somebody who has a PAI that sucks.
Well, I mean, again, that's relative. Again, our score goes 0 to 5. 5 by far is just these are freaks. But if you drop all the way down to 2.5, this is the average for anyone that plays FCS. So I think that's where we've got to keep things in mind and really understand what we're comparing them to, because a 2.5 seems low versus a Power 5 player, but there are guys that make it to the NFL with 2.5. So, but the
average NFL player is a 3.5.
Yes.
Okay.
So
or draftees.
Sorry. Oh, draftees. Gotcha.
Here's the thing I would say about the PAIs that suck is I would tell you that linebacker is the one position that I think the PAI has the most difficulty assessing. And the reason is because the score was designed to have height, weight ranges at the position, and linebacker as a positional assignment today can take on so many different connotations. I mean, you can have these edge guys all the way to these nickel guys. So the range is kind of hard to narrow down. So like I'm pulling up the NFL draft from last year, and I'm just looking at some of the guys that were under 2.0 that were drafted. And 4 of the 5 that were under 2.0 were all linebackers, and the others were safeties, which I would say is also a difficult one for the PAI, only because safety is another one of those kind of hybrid positions. So these big skill positions, these linebackers, these bigger safeties, the PAI has a hard time because the linebackers that are doing track are not blazing normally, and they're not all Isaiah Simmons. Let's just put it that way.
No, right? There aren't many of those. He was a 5, right?
Right, exactly. And so that's the thing, is that they're not all 6'4", 225 in high school and running the 200 at the state level, like low 22s, you know, like they're kind of meandering in this gray area. So sometimes it kind of hits those guys. So a lot of the times the low PAIs that we do have that are successful draft picks play positions such as linebacker or safety that it struggles. But here's the other thing, is that the PAI can't be wrong. because it was never intended to guarantee you who's going to be the best football player.
Sure.
Okay. And I tell guys this all the time. I think it's a really important point from a college recruiter standpoint, Tony, is that, and even from an NFL scout, I'll tell them this. I'm not the one that's drafting this guy. Okay. And I'm also not the one that's signing this guy. You are. So if he ends up being a bad football player, that's on your evaluation, not on mine. If he ends up being a good football player and he happens to have a low PAI, the PAI is still telling the truth about him, which is that at his size, historically compared, he is a little undersized and a little under athletic from what you would normally expect at that position. It doesn't mean that he can't be a great football player. It just means it's more rare for him to become that than for the guys that are the above average and all of that.
You know, Purdue has fallen in love with track athletes, and my fast guy, Marcellus Moore, went there. What was Marcellus's PAI?
So not as good as you would think. And that's because he was just a tiny guy.
5'6", 149.
Exactly. So this is another, and like Anthony Schwartz, who plays for Auburn, is another decent example of this. Not as good. And even Tyreek is a good example of this. These guys, there's a ceiling for these types of guys with how we evaluate, because their size plays a role. And because they're so undersized, there's a cap. They can't get any higher of a score, no matter how fast they get, right? So Marcellus can be the fastest high school football player that we've seen in however many years, okay? But the score is going, well, you've already gotten full credit. I mean, getting 105% credit instead of 100% credit isn't really helping Marcellus, right? The fact is he's 5'6", 149 coming out of high school, right? And that's just what it is. So
he also did not have that wide receiver package that we were talking about. I always gave him hell because he couldn't touch the rim. And we never considered, people say, oh, he'd be as fast as he is. He could long jump 25 feet. And I would just kind of say, I don't think so.
Yeah. And we don't know, right? Because we don't have the data to even know what you probably know because you were with him. But I mean, that's the thing is, I'm not going to say that he's limited just because of the fact that he didn't participate in the jumps, but I think that's the other part of this. Is Aaron brought up the SPARQ score. This is not a raw athletic score. This is a body type and athleticism expression for football players at their particular position, which is why the guy Braden, he's a 4.2 tight end, but he's a 5.0 linebacker.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's because linebackers' heights and weights and athleticism lay out differently than tight ends. And so he just doesn't score as high as a tight end as he does as a linebacker.
Which brings me to Bryce Foster.
Yeah.
Fascinating story. Katy, Texas. 6'4", 328, 64 foot in the shot, 198, and a 5'15" in the 40. But yet he's a 5.0 as an offensive guard, but only a 4.5 as a tackle. Is it because he's an inch short?
It is. And tackle, an inch is everything. Everything. And you know this, Tony. And I mean, Aaron, I don't mean to dominate, but it's like we're talking about linemen, and I'm a hog. So, the 6'4", the difference between 6'4" and 6'5" is significantly more important for an offensive tackle than it is like the difference between 5'11" and 5'10" for a running back. Right. And that's just because of how the data lays out. So at offensive tackle in particular, the score is very sensitive to height. So yes, if he was rounded up an inch or whatever, like it would be a difference it could very well be a difference to his score. Whereas if he played another position, that inch may not make that much of a difference in his score.
Right. Nate Hargis was in the draft 2 years ago, came out early from Stanford. And I wrote an article called Big Cats. And not hogs, big cats. And Nate Hargis was only measured 6'3", and he weighed 340. So he was too short and too fat. And he ran a 5.40 in the 40. And I don't care how good your game film is, you're not getting drafted.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a trend that I think we can identify that suggests that at offensive tackle in particular, colleges, and it expresses itself with the NFL too, but colleges are willing to look at guys that are long, that have multi-sport backgrounds, who they can pack good weight on. You know, it's not to say that body weight doesn't matter anymore to offensive tackles at the high school level. People do not understand the linemen that go to the SEC and the Big Ten. These are enormous human beings. Okay. I mean, they're all 300-pound guys. I mean, they're all big guys, right? It's still pretty rare for a 250-pound guy coming out of high school to become an offensive lineman at a Power 5 program. It just is. However, you're seeing a trend where maybe he's a basketball player. He's 6'6". Currently, he's only 250, but they pull him in and they put, 50 pounds of weight on him the way that they want. And, he turns into this. But even still, body weight it's astonishing to me how big these kids are that signed to these schools.
Now, Joe Staley was one of those guys, wasn't he?
Yep.
He ran 21.9 200 in high school. And now he's an offensive tackle for the Niners.
Yep.
Now, but I think I've read that he weighed closer to 200 pounds than 300 pounds in high school.
But we had him at 225. And again, but that's why he went to Central Michigan, right?
Okay. All right.
I mean, it's no different than J.J. Watt. It's the same thing. J.J. coming out of high school was like 200 and what was he, Aaron? 215?
He was 210 is what we have him in the system, man.
Yeah. I mean, so, and again, it's not to say that he wasn't just this incredible athlete. I mean, for different reasons, JJ was more of a thrower than a runner. But yeah, I mean, these long bodies tend to fall to group of 5 type programs, these long, skinnier bodies, but that athleticism's there. And as soon as they get into a college strength and conditioning program that is kind of, developing them the right way and so on, you can see the benefits because, you go from 225 to 300.
One of the great things I took from your presentation was if you're a track coach or a football coach at a high school and your star running back is just going to lift in the spring, he needs to be told that that's really odd because make sure I get this right. 100% of the drafted running backs last year in the NFL ran track.
Yeah. Running back, you can't get by with it.
You just can't do it.
Not at running back, Tony. Not at running back. I mean, seriously.
That is the most. I'm like, if you're a running back that doesn't run track, you are more than suspect.
You're the anomaly is what you are.
Yeah. And 100% also of the high school All-Americans and the All-American Bowls that you guys are a part of also ran track.
Yeah. Running back is by far the most highly participated position in track and field that there is. And it's really, there's no close second. We all think that the corners and the receivers are the ones running. It's the running backs more than ever. The receivers and so on are a little notch below them when it comes to just the raw participation. It's almost 90% of like every drafted running back in the past decade has run track and field. So, I mean, I don't know what that means, right? I don't know that it means that, if you don't run track, you're not going to play NFL football. It just means your chances are slimmer, right? I mean, by the statistics at least. So,
well, and I think it goes back to what we mentioned earlier, Tony, is we're now in this environment, which running backs may have always been there. Hey, before I sign him to $100,000 a year scholarship, come play Power 5 football, I need verified track times or I feel more comfortable. And if I've got 5 running backs across the nation and I have verified track times on 4 of them, they're probably going to be my top 4 over the 5th guy that I don't have verified times on.
It's all about checking boxes for these college evaluators. And there's so many boxes that need to be checked, right? And it's not just athleticism. And that's something that I think we've learned very quickly is our scores are not an end all be all, and track participation is certainly not an end all be all, but you need to check as many boxes for these college coaches as possible. And if you're not out there, if you're a skill position football player and you're not running track, there's a big question mark from college evaluators as to why you are not doing it. They assume you're not doing it because you are hiding what your true athleticism in those events would be.
Right. How about as a former offensive line coach? I mean, I'm just totally fascinated with big cats. And one of the reasons I'm fascinated is because so many high school offensive line coaches celebrate bad eating. They celebrate getting fat. They don't ever sprint their big guys, all that stuff. Not only should you sprint the big guys, is there any reason why a big offensive tackle or an offensive guard who's going to play major college football should not be throwing?
No, I mean, and I learned that when I was 21 years old and I started coaching and teaching, and I saw it instantly, is that these big, buff, tough football players that like to puff their chest out in the weight room, I got them into the shot ring and they couldn't go over 30 with a 12-pound element, you know, and they got embarrassed. See, as a former fat guy, as a college offensive lineman that was 300 pounds, okay, there's a security aspect to offensive linemen. It's that herd buffalo mentality where we're in a pack, we fill the room, we're big, we're loud, and track exposes you, right? And you have to wear that silly, you know, tank top, and you're not all comfortable with your body, and you're in the ring all by yourself. And oh, by the way, when's an offensive line ever anywhere by himself? Okay. It's this mentality and this psychology that if you don't, and then they're being coached by people that were products of that environment too. So it's a culture that's just, and I coached it for a long time, you know, that's what I did, was offensive line coaching. But what's cool is that, you know, linemen also like charting their progress, which is why they love the weight room. They love the weight room because they can mark their improvement, and then they get their name on a board because they squatted 500 pounds or they benched 300 pounds or whatever they did. They get to see their name on a board. Linemen never get their name on a board or in lights, right? Unless they did something wrong. So what I did with my guys was go, look, like, let's chart your weight room stuff. Great. But let's put numbers to these athletic events so that you can see that you're actually getting better, you know? And that's the problem, is that the kids aren't being shown that they're getting any better at these things. So they're not encouraged to do it. And I'm with you. We need to change that culture, because these big cats, the best that do that position, all have this thread in their background. I mean, they are just, you look at Joe Thomas, and I love what Joe Thomas does just as a proponent of big cats. I mean, Joe Thomas is out there on Twitter, you know, putting things out there for young guys to understand on that level too. So, you know, that's near and dear to my heart. But I also don't think that I assign blame. It's just to say, we got to look at it differently, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's really important for track coaches. I'm always talking about football coaches should infiltrate track, and track coaches should infiltrate football. Mm-hmm. You know, and in a lot of places, as you know, you got a distance geek running the track program and no football coaches on his staff. And he's just constantly pissed at the Neanderthals, and the Neanderthals are pissed at the geeks, and it just doesn't work. But man, if you can get a football coach as your throws coach, it changes everything.
Well, and even at Carmel High School, a 5,000 student school that could attract, you know, any coach that they would want. Okay. Really. I mean, Ken Browner used to coach football at Lawrence North. He's the head track coach. You know, Scott Turnquist, who we mentioned earlier, was the sprints coach and the wide receivers coach. It doesn't just have to be true at the 600 student high school, by the way.
Right.
It can be true at a 5,000 student high school as well, because it's that partnership mentality. Now, you're never going to see eye to eye completely, you know, from the two different perspectives. But you're right. I agree just as much. You hear a lot of, well, football coaches, they don't get it. They don't get this. And I go, well, there's things track coaches don't get too, you know? And that's, you know, that's what I love about what you guys have created, is from that perspective. See, that's where our backgrounds as athletes and coaches can understand that perspective. And we can actually bring that to the colleges as well too. Right. And I'll be honest, I'm sitting at Tennessee, Tony, last spring. Okay. And when we went and visited, we sat with the head coach, the D coordinator, the offensive coordinator, the offensive line coach, okay, all in the meeting room. And then after that, We went and met with the head track coach and the assistant coach who did the jumps, and they were talking. Marcellus came up
Yes.
in that meeting where, you know what, we want to be able to provide a program that can attract people who want to do both in college. And we want to blend our programs so that way we can provide that environment for people like that to whoever gets the scholarship count, whoever gets it, right? But if both programs can benefit, that's where their mindset was. And I was fascinated because I hadn't seen that in a while.
Yeah, you guys are doing such a service, because as much of a challenge that we have, you know, getting football coaches to understand track and track coaches to understand football at the high school level, it's even worse at the college level, because they are such specialists. Their coaches have lived and died football for a long time, and they are very likely never participated in a track and field program in their life. Whereas high school coaches, at least some of us did both, you know? And so for you guys to get in and change that mindset, I think is really important.
It's funny. I think some of the old dogs in the industry are actually the best at understanding the connection. I remember, Aaron, do you remember when we were at AFCA and I don't know which Texas school he was at, and I can't even remember his name. He's probably 65 years old, still position coach. He came to our booth. We told him what we did. Oh, man, I've been doing this for 35 years. What do you mean? And I've been going to the Texas State meet every year to recruit my football players every year, you know? I mean, and it's funny that you say the specialist word, because I do think that there's a generational aspect to it. I think that some of these younger guys in football, they may not see that track connections, maybe as some of these guys that have been around longer, right? And know the more historic anecdotes.
Well, that also reminds me of we ran into a Power 5 offensive line coach, and he said when he gets up in, west of you, he just goes to the district regional shot put and discus rings and looks for some big guys, and then takes the names down and then goes back and watches their football film, because he knows how they move from watching them in the ring.
I remember one time going to a track meet. I'm sure you guys have the same stories to tell, but there was a guy that had shaved his head and he had a beard, and he was about 6'7", and he threw, I think, 60 feet in warm-ups. And I asked their coach, I said, "Where's he going?" And he said, "Oh, he's going to play tackle at Illinois." And to make a long story short, he has a 13-year career in the NFL, because if you see a guy with that kind of size and that type of explosive stuff, and especially Brian knows this, being a throws guy, strength has very little to do with the throws. I mean, it is truly packing together strength in a very brief part of very, like a nanosecond. So it's really a power event. And it's just so much different than watching a guy bench press or squat.
Yeah.
So you want to hear something that I think is funny. I literally was talking to Mark about this today, because we've been asked a lot, can we provide video of these track performances so that football coaches can watch it and evaluate it? And I kind of shudder on that for a couple of reasons. First, what are you going to see? What is a football coach going to see on a track video that's going to change things for him? But I also, what you just said made me think about the effortless throw, right? Where when you pop one, it's like you didn't even feel it. It's like it was just so in sync. And when you watch, like Mark and I were talking about it with the long jump, there's times where we would watch kids long jump, and the way that he came off the board, we'd be like, man, that's going to be a 23-foot long jump, right? And all of a sudden it was like, well, how was it that, right? How was that a 21? I thought that looked like a 20. What you see is not always what what the number says, you know what I mean? And that's where I think that's interesting that you point out, because this idea that we need to see the strain and we need to see the, grunt.
You're not going to see it in track.
You're not going to see it.
Ever.
And it's going to look
effortless.
These guys are not going to look like they're running very fast or trying very hard, Elastic,
efficient speed.
Yep.
And I mean, in 1995, I had a guy went 13 times over 7 foot. 7.2 was his best. I remember a school board member came out. He said, I've got to see this Damon Lampley jump. And he watched him go 7 foot without a miss. He went like 6'8", 6'10", 7 foot, no misses. And his comment to me is, that doesn't even look that high. It's like, you're right. All great athletes make it look easy.
Yep. And that's where I think it's great because, you know, obviously you can see that and you can see the natural movement and that they've got great skills in that regard. But yeah, I mean, that's what I love about track data is like football coaches are extremely visual creatures, right? And they need to see it to believe it. They're very suspicious about numbers just in general. If they can't attach it to video proof. But even if you did that, I guess I don't know how much more of the story they're going to get from it. Now, maybe other people that are, you know, more educated on all of that would be able to extract more from the footage. But yeah, that's an interesting thing that just popped into my head.
One more thing before we go to question and answers here. I was fascinated that you brought up Nichols Harbor. Mm-hmm. Now, I checked him out on Twitter, and he doesn't claim to be whatever size you said he was. He claims to be like 6'6" now and whatever, but he's only a sophomore.
Yeah, I mean yeah, it's funny. When we put him in, it was a while ago that we put him into the day because he had really good 19 data too. And then I think he might've had 1 or 2 2020 data points, but their season got cut short. So the size thing, okay, this is an inexact science in this current, and look, the more years that go by, the more data we've got and the more verification we can do. When they're freshmen in high school, we're not drawing straws, but we're making educated guesses and we're always conservative. So maybe the kid is what he claims, which I think he said 6'4", 215.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. But again, he's a perfect scorer if he's 6'3", whatever we had.
Yeah, 6'3", 200 as a sophomore and running 10.7 and 21.7.
But it's fascinating because there's a guy that I talked to Boston College, and I text their personnel director when I saw that they had offered him. And I said, you offered that guy. What made you offer him? He didn't even know that they had offered him. He's like, that my position coach offered him. He knew his coach, and his coach said, better get in on this guy. And I said, well, and Boston College is not currently a client. I said, well, if you would have had track and football, you could have just pinged him last year even. But that guy goes to me, he goes, that kid's going to have every offer in the country before it's all said and done. This kid hadn't even really played football yet, and that's the beauty of what we're doing is some of these elite guys, we get this question a lot is how many times do I get a football player that as a freshman ran like 11.8 and then turns into a 10.7? They all want to know that. They all want to be able, they want us to tell them that if this football player runs a 100-meter dash as a freshman, what will he run as a senior? And maybe you can answer that. I can't answer that.
No, every kid's different.
That? Or can you answer that? I can't.
I can't, no.
And I don't know. I mean, there's so many factors involved, right? Like how could you possibly do that? So my thing is, let's just understand what it looks like compared to all the other freshmen that have currently run the 100, and then by the time he's a senior, then we can look at that and move on and on. But they're really wanting to know right now, how do I get this predictive so I can see what he'll become as a senior? And they don't get that you can't really do that,
I mean, it even depends on the sprint coach. Exactly. If that kid is going to a Clyde Hart school, run with a track program that's run by a distance coach, he may be doing repeat 200s almost every day. Their goal might be to get tired every day compared to a sprint program like mine. And looking back, I was actually reflecting on it today. One of the things that really changed me was a personal trainer for the NFL draft. And in 2003, he said to me, I was at a clinic with like 5 guys. And he said, anything you do for more than five seconds is not working on speed. And it's like, I mean, I was already a speed guy, but that totally changed me. And in many ways, I train my sprinters like I'm a combine guy. And what I find is if you're training a guy to run a 4.40, you're training them pretty good for the 100 meters. And guys that are good at the 100 are pretty good at the 200. And they're pretty competitive, and you can stick them in the 4x4. So it works for me. And I just feel sorry for the high schools that do not have a true sprint program that will develop those guys.
Well, and that comes up, Tony, is the guys that look at our data have brought up to us, well, how do I know the caliber of coaching that they're receiving at the high school? And how do I know how much of a factor that's playing in their results? You know what I mean? I'm sitting here using these results as an indication of this individual's athleticism, yet he's just at the mercy of who he's getting coached by. But I think this also goes back to the point that you kind of made earlier about, we all just assume we're selecting speed and that we can't develop it. I would also argue, though, that like there's just unicorns out there. There's just really elite kids out there that, I know you're an amazing sprint coach and you can get a lot out of guys, but you can't make everybody be what Marcellus became,
No.
And Marcellus indicated super early on in his high school track career that he was a really special athlete, really fast.
Yeah, he's the fastest 14-year-old in the history of the world.
And so my thing is like, when you look at this Harbor guy, what I always tell these guys is, look, if they indicate like that early on, which a lot of these elite guys truly do indicate early on, that they are just special. So, they want to say like, well, if he was better coached, this 11-7 guy, man, he would be a 10-9. I'm like, no, he wouldn't. Like, you're not coaching on, and I say that, and I don't even know the truth, but I can't imagine that the best sprint coach in the world is going to take, a guy that's, high 11s and get him to, high 10s in a normal scenario, right? I mean, am I wrong there?
Those unicorns, I've made the comment several times that the truly elite sprinters are almost coach proof. That wow. you can actually take them through stuff that I think is just stupid as hell. And they will survive it, and they will still run amazing times. And so we have to be careful about, as coaches, not to own our kids' performance all the time as a direct result of our process. Yeah. But I do think that there are kids that might be sub 11 in some programs that only go 11.5 in others.
And I'm not to say that it's still not beneficial for those kids to be participating, because they will get faster and they will become better athletes. And if they are coached, they will improve. And like I said, by the way, as a football evaluator, we spend all this time saying, guys, the average SEC wide receiver in the past 10 years runs an 11.2. Okay. They don't, so don't throw the 11.2s out with the bathwater. Like 11.2 is a good time, especially a larger guy. And that's the stuff that, they have to be convinced of. So, that's stuff that we're talking about to these guys.
Let's go to some Q&A. We're doing good here. Let's see. What do programs that you speak with that ultimately decide not to use your services cite as their primary reasons? That's one of the best questions of the night.
I'll leave that to the salesman.
That's the same. I have that same question myself. But I will say that the biggest thing we hear is that it's a budget concern.
Okay.
But what I really think it comes down to is a staff's philosophy. And does that person in the recruiting department feel like they can justify what it is that we're selling because it is so science, data, and objectively driven? Our competitors in the market it's almost like they specialize in doing subjective evaluations. So we come at this from a completely different viewpoint, and it's that out of the box thinking that it requires to change what you've done for 20 years to try something like what we offer.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
This is from Jason. I'm a head football coach and head track coach at a small private high school. I make all the football players not playing baseball, swim, volleyball, or golf run track for me. Most of the athletes in our small school already play some sport. How can your program site help me?
Well, help him, I don't know. Help their athletes if they're football players. I think, here's the thing is we have 25,000 high school football player profiles in our database, and only about 55% of those guys do track. So they only the 55% get a PAI score. The rest of them are in there and discoverable through a whole bunch of other filters, even if it's just body type. Or we have guys a lot, especially on the West Coast, because California is not as big of a track and field participation state as like Texas and Florida are. But you still see volleyball and basketball and multi-sport. So we have a lot of guys that use our site that go, I want to find 6'6" offensive tackles that are from these areas that also play basketball. The other thing too is we've developed a lot of solutions around high school combine data, and we've actually developed a separate analytic, a separate score that uses combine data to develop a 0 to 5 athleticism score. And what its recipe is height, weight, position, just like the PAI, but then it includes the 40, the shuttle, and then either the vertical or the broad jump. So we can take those events and give a score, and all of that context is to D1 football players. So the point being that, and we hear this a lot from college clients, is like, well, what if they don't do track? What can you tell us about them? Well, we can tell you plenty about them, or at least that they exist, because we're charting. We looked at our sheet. We are factoring 105 different columns of information for every prospect that we put into the database.
105.
And it's going to be more with our new site. So Right now we're charting, we have the ability to chart up to 105 different aspects of a football player. And it'll probably increase by, I don't know, around a dozen on the new site.
For example, Tony, we can easily tell a high school coach or kid right now, depending on the player's true height and weight, where does he rank at that position at D1 FCS? So we have so much data that it can literally say, hey, he's at this, being 6'4" makes him at the 67th percentile at this position for the last 10 years.
There's Mountain West programs that are clients of ours that have offered a kid his first scholarship offer because they found him on Track and Football and the kid didn't do track. So,
Yeah, that's cool. Now, the next question actually asks about, before I ask that, I knew I had a follow-up. Do you ever talk directly to high school athletes?
We do. I mean, I'm a teacher, so, I kind of use social media to put stuff like that I think is targeting high school athletes. And I know another guy that works with us named Tyler Lysing, he runs our Tracking Football recruiting Twitter account, where kids are constantly DMing us, asking us if they can get into our database. And we're like, well, you already are. Just keep participating in track. Relax. He's like, well, what's my score? Well, here's your score. Is that good? All that stuff happens. But the thing about the high school stuff is we will never, ever have a business model that will make money off of parents or kids, period. So, we did an app at one point in time that was free, and it was an amazing app, actually. If I was a football coach, I would have been all over it. It just, giving something away for free is one of the most horrible experiences we've ever gone through in our life. Is that they're not paying you, but they want the same level of customer service that you're getting from people that are paying you, tens of thousands of dollars. So it's like, that's just it wasn't for us. But everything that we do is really for high school kids, to be honest with you, because we really pride ourselves. And Aaron and I do this all the time. Hey, did you see so-and-so got an offer? Like, that's awesome. Like, I hope Nicholas blows up. And I hope one of the biggest reasons that he blows up is because we're talking about him right now,
That's right. Now, the next question, from Darren Wecker asks about miles per hour data, and I'm going to twist his question a little bit so we can talk about the special combine that you guys and me both contributed to. My contribution was tiny. Basically, I just want a miles per hour coming out of the sprint. And I think that miles per hour, because I think miles per hour is more predictive towards acceleration, change of direction, and just about everything athletic globally than any other stat. How fast is your most extreme movement? So if your car can go 260 miles an hour, you're probably pretty good at going 100 too. So anyway, I want you to explain what this track, gosh, what do we even call it? It's a tracky football combine.
Yeah, the Armory is hosting a basically a quasi track event specifically for football players. It's happening this weekend. I'm amped. I'm excited. I can't wait for it. It's something that came to us from and I'm gonna forget his last name. I'm trying to look it up. Dominic, who does the
Westchester Athletics. He's a track coach. He's actually
Dominic,
he was supposed to be hosting a TFC in New York City for us, but we've canceled it because of COVID. So
Dominic called me via DM'd me on Twitter, and then we had a phone conversation, and then we brought Mark involved, and then we brought in more people like Aaron Robeson from the Armory. Anyway, it's kind of their brainchild that they reached out to us and asked us if we could help them. So basically they said, we want to put on an event. We want to target high school football players with this event. How do we do it? What do we do? So we thought, okay, what can we do at the Armory that nobody else could do at a high school combine event? So they're going to do what they're calling the Mondo Dash, okay? Which basically everybody that comes to the event is going to have to do it. And they're allowed to wear spikes if they want, stuff like that. I think, I can't remember if that's true.
I think they can, yeah.
Yep. But then they're going to set up FAT to get readings on the 10-yard split, the 30-yard split, the 40-yard split, and then the 55.
The 55 meter.
The 55 meter.
So the
they're going to run a
55 is the track component.
And it's,
The 40 is the football.
Yep.
And then the 30-yard to 40-yard will instantly be calculated into miles per hour.
Yep. And so now with one race that's in a competitive heat mentality, right? You're going to extract, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different data points at one time, FAT for every position that's doing it. So I'm jacked because I think that this mentality could change the way that we do combines. And then they're doing things like the standing long jump, but they're going to do it into the sand pit. They're doing
the standing because the regular long jump is too technical. Exactly.
And everybody can do it. But, you know, that's the thing is every position is going to do every event. They're going to measure the heights and weights. And they're actually going to use a high jump bar with a laser attached to it to get to like the most accurate height and stuff. And then they're doing a 5, 10, 5 shuttle with FATs above. So they're going to have an FAT shuttle, which is going to be crazy. Nobody's ever done an FAT shuttle. They'll do laser shuttles, but not an FAT camera-based shuttle.
Right.
And then the med ball throw in place of the shot put. They're going to do a med ball throw in the ring. I think they're going to take the toe board off, and they're going to do a kneeling med ball toss into the pit.
Because that would be, it's just too hard. At first they said they won the shot put.
Yeah.
But to a football kid who's not thrown the shot, that's not fair and it doesn't test power.
Right. That MPH thing that you brought though, Tony, I'm telling you right now, I mean, I've talked to schools I've told Penn State they're going to get those results and they're like, great. I mean, we've talked to NFL clients that are like, wow, like, how are you doing this MPH? Everybody in football thinks the only way to derive an MPH is by a wearable or by computer vision.
Right.
You know, they don't understand that you just have them run like you had talked about, and you can extract it from a formula, right?
From a formula.
And so with that, we're going to see how it gets received, but I have high expectations that us deriving an MPH from a 55-meter dash that can then extract those commonly understood 40 times and all that, I think we're onto something pretty special that could probably be done in Florida. It could be, you know, we could expand the model with a bunch of the indoor track of venues that exist across the country. I mean, I really think we could do something pretty cool. So I'm excited to see. They ended up getting like almost, I think, 150 guys signed up
Wow.
in the middle of COVID in New York City to come to this thing, and they're really excited about it.
They put so much time into being healthy COVID wise and distancing and what door to come in, and it's just they've just done a great job. And you talk about thinking out of the box and stuff, and it's
going to be streamed, by the way, on athletic.net live. So anybody that's on this podcast or whatever, like, you can stream it Saturday. You can watch this thing live, actually. Maybe we can get the link out on social media or something, Tony. But yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Very cool. And I just love the idea of having a combine / track event. I mean, like that's like what you and I are doing, you know. That's great stuff. Let's see what the next question says. Hope nobody has any joke questions here. Oh, this is from Josh McClure. He's a friend. I'm a high school S&C guy. I'm trying to help my players be more recruitable, have a higher PAI. What are some of the things I should encourage them to do, events to participate in outside the obvious, play multi-sport and run track?
I would say any track event beneath the 800 is helpful. And, you know, as you know, Tony, I think any of the training that those football players get in the shot put ring, in the long jump, triple jump, it just helps them perform better on the football field. And the beautiful thing is the coaching is typically free. You don't have to pay for a personal trainer or pay to have someone help you do something. It's part of what is offered at the school. And again, if for some reason people are free to email us and we'll add kids, but as Brian said, they do a great job of managing our database, and, you know, we'll get any kids that throw certain, you know, 40 feet and above, 42 feet and above, and then we look for height and weight. So, I mean, we're always looking for more kids to add to the database. And if for some reason your kid's not there, just a simple email or reaching out to us on Twitter, and we can double check.
This question might feed right into that answer. It says, I have an offensive lineman at our small school, 6'3", 280. That's already pretty good. Is it safe to say that if his goal is to play college football, which he's told me is his goal, is it better for him to throw for track than to be a first baseman? Ooh, this is a tough question. In baseball, is there baselines that he should try to hit to be a 3.0 as far as throwing distance?
Yeah,
that's a loaded question because not many great football players played baseball.
Yeah, look, I would never tell a kid that you should do track so that you can get a football scholarship. I'm not going to say that. I mean, I think that if he loves baseball, he plays baseball. If he loves track, he does track, and he does what he loves to do. From the baseline perspective, a kid that already kind of possesses the prototypic size that you would expect to see at lineman can usually throw the shot in the low 40s and have a score that is of the average kind of Division I offensive lineman. Okay. So if you're in kind of that appropriate range, 6'3" is a little short for a tackle, but as we talked about, not for a guard. But if you're in that range of 285 to 300 and you're 6'3" to 6'5", let's say, you know, and you're throwing low 40s, your PAI will be in the ballpark of what, you know, you would expect to see. And then if you're Bryce Foster and you're then a 64-foot shot putter, that's when you go to that 5.0. But I think it's important to realize that, I mean, football is still going to get this kid a football scholarship more than anything. His tape is what the colleges are going to ultimately base their decision on. And if I'm going to recommend anything to high school football players, and it's difficult these days with COVID because what always was tried and true is you needed to get to the football campus and do their camp in the summer. All of these other camps, these exposure camps, these combines and so on that kind of promise exposure.
Money makers.
You know, And yeah, you said it, not me. But the point is that Aaron suggested that you can get athletically developed from your baseball coach or from your track coach or from your football coach or your strength coach. But, you know, if you want to get if you want eyes on you, the best camps to go to are the ones that the colleges host, right? And then the biggest thing that kids can do to help themselves in all of this, honestly, to help them get discovered, is literally like put a good profile in your Twitter handle that has your position and your name and your school, and organize your huddle clips. And kids can target personnel department guys on Twitter, coaches on Twitter, deliver all that message on social media. They can get eyes on them. You know, you're not going to earn a scholarship just because you go out and throw or just because you play first base. You got to be a good football player. You know, so that's what ultimately is going to get him a scholarship.
Very interesting. How about Jim Clarkson asked, what about injuries like ACLs? How's that affect the data and stuff?
We don't have any data specifically around injury data. Now, I have read pieces where, you know, multi-sport athletes seem to be less likely to receive some of these injuries. Now, is that particularly in football? Is that just some of these other sports? You know, I cannot say for sure, but I mean, my anecdotal experience would tell me that multi-sport athletes have safer injuries or less injuries than specialists would have.
But I would also say that while we don't chart it, it's becoming more and more relevant, certainly to the NFL, but also to big time college football as well. There's a lot more things happening when it comes around like the soft tissue and just different ways to evaluate the makeup of the body. We've had lots of cool conversations with like companies like Dexalytics.
Yeah.
You know, that type
TFC,
of stuff.
They sponsored us last year. What a great group they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things because that's a big factor for certainly at the NFL level. It's one of the biggest factors, but at college even too. And then, you know, even things like personality assessments and things like that are certainly in the NFL, but they're also creeping their way into college football. So like I said, it's a series of check boxes that are occurring. And we have been successful, I think, because we're not a jack of all trades. We do what we do. We stay in our lane and we try to do the best at what we do. And I think that's helped us to be successful. And we haven't tried to do everything that.
Right. And there's room for more than one person at the table.
Yep.
Right. I mean, like, absolutely. You guys don't have to have an exclusive at Clemson or something. I mean, they can, you know, find all kinds of sources.
Well, look, here's the fun part is that track data, anybody at any time can go look up track data. I mean, this is not a secret. We're not delivering some exclusive data set that only we have, meaning that if they wanted to, we have clients or non-clients tell us like, well, our staff would rather just, you know, look up all this stuff on their own, which they're doing. I mean, you know, they are looking that stuff up, but you know, it's that context, right? And if you can kind of show them insights that they couldn't otherwise produce, that's when you get somewhere.
To end this, there may be a couple other people that want to throw something out in the chat, but I think people are always I'm interested in knowing PAIs of people. And you have your computer open?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't even know for sure who James Robinson is. Is he the running back for the Jags? No. He's not on my fantasy team, so I don't know who the hell he is.
Yeah, let me look him up. So I got 3 different James Robinsons in our college database, and none of them did track and field. So I don't know if this is a college guy or
I think he's NFL.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, plays for the Jags.
Plays for the Jags. Let me pull him up real quick. Is he from Illinois State? Yeah, I think he is.
Yes.
Yep. Let me see if I got any track data on him. Because again, I think that the thing that people got to understand is that to have a PAI, we have to have his track data. Now, I have reference that he played basketball in high school, and he was a UDFA out of Illinois State, 5'9", 200 pounds in high school, but we don't have track data on him.
Well, I think that's interesting too, is that something we haven't talked about was that, yes, in the NFL, 56% did track, but 44% did probably the most athletic building sport I know of, which is basketball. Stop, start, sprint, jump, change of directions. They're all professional plyometric guys. They're all professional catchers. They all have great visual awareness. I mean, if you watch Mahomes play basketball in high school, I mean, he was like a little Pete Maravich. I mean, he played basketball like he played football. And so the fact that I don't even think Mahomes ran track.
No, he didn't. He didn't. You're bringing up, you asked earlier about what surprised us about the data. Here's one thing that surprises me is that if you look at just generic college football signees, we talked about the layout of the percentages. The amount of NFL guys that are 3-sport athletes, specifically basketball, track, and football, that percentage is so much higher for NFL players than just the college players.
Yeah.
There's a huge uptick, to your point, with NFL players that not just did track, but did track in basketball in comparison. I mean, it's pretty significant. And that is something that jumped out at me. I was like, man, like that number of 3-sport athletes and specifically track and basketball is way higher for NFL guys than just the generic signed guys in college.
And going back to the thing, the Twitter wars I get myself into, I try to stay out of them, but these people that want to talk causation and correlation, that they say, hell yeah, Mahomes was a fantastic athlete, so he was good in 3 sports. That means nothing. And I think you and I almost get like fighting mad when we hear about that, because there are benefits to playing basketball for Patrick Mahomes. There were benefits for him being a great baseball player. And we're not even talking about track, which hopefully is totally established here. But I believe they feed each other, that it is not just a correlation, it is also a causation.
No, I think that there's too much evidence to suggest otherwise, right? And so, I mean, those arguments typically come from people that have a motive to claim that guys should not be doing all those other things, but yet coming to my special field house or whatever, and getting trained only by me. I mean, yes. No discredit to that industry either. It's just that when it comes to football players, I'm not going to talk about other sports. That's the other one that bothers me is, well, tell me about the NFL or the NBA draft. I don't track, you go study that. I don't track that. Like we're talking about football players. That's what we're talking about. Like, that's it. Right. So,
and basketball players in the modern world are specialists. I don't like that, but they are specialists. I think there's a lot of slow basketball players these days in high school basketball because all they do is dribble 12 months a year. Mm-hmm. Having said that, football is such a brief sport. When you think about a 9-game season, which what most kids have, they're going to play football games 9 times a year. And the idea that somehow they're going to be in a windowless room the rest of the year is just bizarre to me, obviously. And I think you guys have done a great job of proving that that's not the best way to go about it.
I appreciate that. Do you ever hear the one where they go, well, you can't count track as a sport? You ever hear that one on Twitter?
Oh yeah.
All the football players are forced to do track, so you can't count that. Okay, I guess I can't. Track's an older sport than football, by the way.
It is, and there's been some pretty good athletes. I always say that the worst thing that I fight all the time, not all the time, but there are a lot of parents, especially like they start kids in baseball when they're 4, and they're traveling the country when they're 5. With uniforms that cost $120. And so track gets such a late start that when a kid finally goes into track, the parents are so unaware of track that they think it's like a recreation thing. Like people are shocked when they hear that I cut from my track team. I only cut sprinters. You know, if you're too slow to be on my sprint group, you have to go run with the distance guys or you're off the team. Yeah. And it's because I can't coach 100 sprinters. You know, there's a reason why basketball teams only have 12 to 15 guys. That's a coachable number. So I cut. And when people hear that, this recreational mentality immediately is like, oh, I thought track was a no-cut sport. They truly think it's like a recreational, get in shape spring that's like good for fitness. And what I like to say is, no, track and field is where a school's best athletes compete against another school's best athletes with nowhere to hide. I mean, you're just out there. And that's one reason football players many times are terrified of track and field because they don't want to lose.
You know, it's funny.
So you got to put them on the 4x1, 4x2.
That's the bet. But the best thing that you hear it sometimes from college football recruiters, Tony, is they'll say, well, you know, he probably ran that time because he doesn't really take track seriously. Like, they'll try to excuse it, right? They'll see a slow time and they'll be like, I'm going to look, his tape tells me he's fast. Okay, fine. Well, he probably ran that because he doesn't really care. And I go, so you're in the business of recruiting athletes that don't care about athletic contests? Like, that doesn't make much sense to me, right?
Never happens.
That's the great thing about track is that I think people that understand the marriage between football and track understand those are the areas where track and field does something completely different for a football player than what football could ever do for him. From a performance standpoint, is that just the stage. I mean, I threw discus as a junior in the high school sectional meet, and I hit the post 3 times in a row because I was so nervous in the ring with all those people. I hit the post 3 times. All right. I scratched out of my sectional meet. I wasn't used to performing on a stage like that. But it helped me for my next year of football. That's for sure. It turned me, I learned from it. And those are the types of things that just as high school coaches, we understand. And I think what's cool is we can relay that message to these football coaches too. And I think it's resonating more. I really do. I think the last 5 years we've seen a greater acceptance of the message, not just from the hard data, but also from the soft skills as well.
Yep. You guys, I have had just a blast. This hour and 37 minutes has gone really fast. We could do this often. So thank you so much for being a part of TFC and your continued support over the last 5 years of what we do. And hopefully we've supported you guys in the same way. And what's great and why we can be so passionate and what you've alluded to already is that what we're talking about is what's best for kids. Multi-sport participation, educational sports opportunities instead of travel teams and all that stuff. And kids getting the most out of their abilities. So this is something where we're not charging kids, but we're helping them.
Yes. Well,
Aaron, thank you. Brian, thank you.
Having us.
Thank you.
This will be on recording for everybody else who wasn't live with us. So people can find this online. People are happy that we did this, so that looks good. So I need to end this now. Thank you again. We'll talk.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.